Monica Lewinsky back in the headlines, delivering a passionate TED Talk this week, calling for an end to cyberbullying. So let's bring in the roundtable, Democratic strategist and CNN commentator Van Jones, Oklahoma Congressman Tom Cole, Steve Inskeep, host of NPR's Morning Edition, and our own Cokie Roberts. Good morning to everyone. Cokie, I want to start with you. You were watching Lewinsky. The people in the audience seemed to respond to her message.
It covered the story like a cheap suit.
So does the country reassess what happened 20 years ago? How are we supposed to look at that?
I think that people bring to it whatever prejudices they already had. But in her case, look, she clearly wants to be in the limelight. You don't do this unless you want to be in the limelight. But if she's using the limelight for a good cause, more power to her. I was kind of struck listening to her talking about how awful the internet can be, the social media, the bullying, all of that, because it was very similar to what the Romney family said about not running for president again. You know, it's brutal out there.
Steve, what about the message of cyberbullying and shaming?
Well,
it's
a very real thing. We're actually expecting to interview an author who has an entire book about the culture of shaming, the way that people can be flamed permanently in a moment. And so while people may cringe that Monica Lewinsky is out there again, I watched the TED Talk. It's rather interesting. She's reaching out and talking about other people and other people's experiences, and it's never really a bad thing to try to understand what's happening to someone else, particularly someone else on the other side of that digital divide who you can reach in an instant, you can destroy in an instant, but you may not realize it.
But she'd be in the spotlight no matter what,
well,
so she might as well do something good.
Unless she decided to, you know, change her name or get married and take her husband's name.
Good luck with that. Yeah, good luck with changing the name. Congressman Cole, were you cringing?
No,
when you watched that?
No, not cringing, but count me as somewhat skeptical that the timing is purely coincidental. Look, it's an important message. She certainly has a right to make whatever statement she cares to make, and she's gone through a lot. So, you know, it's probably a teachable moment, but I don't think it's a particularly profound moment.
And she says it's not political. She doesn't really mention the Clintons, particularly Hillary Clinton.
But listen, I think everybody, and I think that would be all 300 million Americans who've ever made a joke with Lewinsky as a punchline, should watch this talk. It was riveting. She's much smarter, she's deeper psychologically, historically than I expected, and I think that she actually makes a point that a lot of people can identify with. Obviously, people have sympathy for Hillary Clinton. I think that a lot of people now feel fear that they're going to be cyberbullied or they're going to have their personal lives exposed. And she spoke about it in a way, I think, punchline no more. Good on Monica Lewinsky.
And I think she's really talking to a younger generation as well.
Right.
Before we go to break, our Powerhouse puzzler inspired by this visit. Prince Charles and his wife Camilla meeting President Obama in the Oval Office this week. So here's the question. The prince's first trip to the U.S. was back in 1970 when, reportedly, President Nixon tried to set up the Prince of Wales with whom? The answer in 2 minutes.
That's easy.
So who did President Nixon reportedly try to set up Prince Charles with back in 1970, Van?
Maybe Pat Nixon? You never know.
Okay, this is, you get the humor award. You get...
I think he could have done this sort of thing.
No, very, very good. Yes,
kind of a Nixon to China kind of
Cokie stays very straight and narrow.
But I've also added, when was the first Prince of Wales visit to America ever?
Go ahead, give us the answer.
It was in President Buchanan's administration.
Okay.
The Prince.
What's the answer?
Okay, maybe we'll have that on another puzzler. But this was a pretty easy one. Tricia, humor award again. The answer is Tricia Nixon, back with that big announcement from Ted Cruz.
There are a number of things that you just say, you know, I wish I'd have said that differently. But the real heart that I wish we'd have done differently and that I'd have done differently is make a greater effort at communicating to minority voters in this country the policies that I think are right to help minority families.
Mitt Romney this week revealing what he says is the biggest mistake of his 2012 run for the White House in an exclusive interview with Yahoo Global News anchor Katie Couric, and also weighing in on Obama's ISIS strategy.
Well, he's the Pete Carroll of foreign policy play calls. Today, our options are dramatically limited as a result of the president having been so bad at taking action at the best time, at the propitious time.
So do you think fighting ISIS will require, ultimately, U.S. boots on the ground in those countries?
I sure hope not, but I think as the President of the United States, you have to say that we will defeat ISIS, period. We're not going to say we won't do this, we won't do that, we won't do that, and we sure hope that's enough.
His take on Hillary Clinton and the email uproar.
If you were in Hillary Clinton's shoes right now, what would you do about this controversy surrounding her emails?
Well, I think it's hard for me to make that assessment because I don't know what she's hidden. I don't know what she has in her server at home. I don't know what she deleted, but it's a mess. I mean, what you see here is Clintons behaving badly. I mean, we've seen this before. I mean, it's always something with the Clintons, which is that they have rules which they describe before they get into something, and then they decide they don't have to follow their own rules. And that, I think, is going to be a real problem for her.
Plenty of other politicians, though, as you know, Governor, have used personal email while in office. You did while you were governor of Massachusetts. So what is the difference, and why is what she did more egregious?
Well, because there are federal guidelines and federal rules that Hillary Clinton didn't follow. There are no state of Massachusetts rules about using private email. She was the Secretary of State, but she chose to say no. I'm not going to follow those rules and regulations. Not only am I going to have private email, I'm going to put the server in my house so that there's no way anyone could find out what was really said. That is something which is going way beyond the pale.
And his thoughts on the 2016 field.
What do you think of Jeb Bush?
He's a terrific guy. We're good friends. I think he'd be a very good president.
Is he your guy, then?
Oh, I haven't chosen a person, and I don't expect to endorse anybody in this race.
Ever?
Maybe way down the road, but at least at this stage, we've got a large group of mainstream Republicans that I'm going to be watching carefully.
Our thanks to Katie. Check out the full interview at yahoo.com. And back now with the roundtable. And Congressman Cole, I want to turn to you, and I want to quickly talk about those emails a little bit more. The House Benghazi Committee on Friday called for Secretary Clinton to turn over her private server for review by April 3rd. Is that something they should be doing?
It is, and frankly, it's a mystifying self-inflicted wound. I mean, it's not as if you didn't know this was going to be found out at some point. It's like taking money from foreign countries for the corporation, or frankly, the whole string of well-paid speeches when you don't really need the money. If you're getting ready to run for president, you ought to be preparing yourself to run. This is, I think, bad governance and not appropriate, but it's just political stupidity.
Van, there's a new CNN poll out this week. A slim majority of voters think the personal email issue is a serious problem and that she did something wrong, but 57% still say they'd be proud to have her as president.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is, look, I wish that she had handled it differently. She said she wishes that she had handled it differently. But this is just the Republican, machine. It jumps up and down every time she does something. The reality is she is head and shoulders above every Republican candidate, and they got about 20. She's 10 to 20 points ahead of them.
We're getting to those Republicans.
That'll change once there's one Republican.
I'm just saying, this particular scandal is a big nothing.
No, I agree that it's going to go away, but Governor Romney actually made the point that will stick, which is the point about there go the Clintons again. And now it's possible that anybody who feels that way was not going to vote for it to begin with. But there is that sense in the body politic of, oh, is it going to be an exhausting, scandal-ridden administration that we have to just keep going back at?
Well, the big news this morning, a Boston Globe editorial saying Elizabeth Warren, step up and run. Democrats would be making a big mistake if they let Hillary Clinton coast to the presidential nomination without real opposition. And as a national leader, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren can make sure that doesn't happen. While Warren has repeatedly vowed that she won't run for president herself, she ought to reconsider, because I believe the Boston Globe supported Barack Obama.
I do think it's true that it's better for the Democratic Party if Hillary Clinton is opposed, because she has to get her arguments out. It would make her a better candidate in the general election. If I were Elizabeth Warren, I would not choose to be the sacrificial lamb in that particular contest. And the Boston Globe is rooting for a hometown girl in a very liberal state.
Okay, Steve Inskeep, I'm going to turn to you for the Republican field, because tomorrow a big announcement from Ted Cruz. Surprise, he will be running in 2016.
What do you know? What do you know?
And the others are probably get a few more in April. So
Well, I guess I'm not too surprised that he would go out early, because Ted Cruz is competing for the leadership of the purity wing of the Republican Party. And he suddenly has competition in the Senate from Tom Cotton, this new freshman Republican who's been making a lot of news. This is a way that Cruz can get back out in front of things. And it's really fascinating to me to watch the different approaches of different Republicans here, Martha. You do have someone like Cruz who's saying, I'm the purist. And of course, he's the purist of his version of Republicanism, but he says, I'm the guy who's going to purify the Republican Party. You have someone like Rand Paul, who already has credibility as a certain kind of purist and is working to show that he's actually credible and a well-rounded person. And then you have other potential candidates like Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush, who are trying to work on the Republican brand and to argue that some of the stereotypes about the Republican Party need to be broken, and that Republican ideas can be, as you even heard Mitt Romney saying on the videotape, good for poor people, good for minorities, and they're working on those issues.
Congressman Cole, I want to turn to you, and turning to what we call our Facebook centimeter, which measures the social discussion online about the 2016 candidates. Much more conversation online about candidates like Scott Walker, Rand Paul, then Jeb Bush. In the past week, over 1 million interactions for Walker and Paul, less than half that for Bush, and the interactions for Walker and Paul were much more positive. Is that a generational thing, or?
Well, I actually think, and Steve alluded to this, we're really in a big debate to define who and what the Republican Party is. It really transcends the individual candidacies. And each one of these people represent different slivers. And the question is, can they grow and be more inclusive? Or if they purify the Republican Party, I mean, we'll be down to 5%. So you know, this is an addition, not subtraction business. I'd feel pretty good, honestly, about the array of candidates that we're going to put in front of the people. And I think the more the merrier. I like the contrast with the Democratic field.
Okay, I want to turn to another Republican. A resignation this week of 33-year-old Aaron Schock, who most of us, I think, remember from a magazine cover or maybe Instagram more than that. Listen to what his father said after his resignation.
10 years from now, whatever he's doing, he'll be successful at. I'll promise you that. 2 years from now, he'll be successful. Because if he's not in jail.
And on that note, thanks, Dad. Yeah, thanks for that support. But the FBI is investigating.
You know, I think it's awful. I know him, and I don't take any joy in this problem that he has right now. What's really interesting is that we have a system of legalized bribery where people basically run down the halls of Congress with big wheelbarrows full of cash. But as long as you file the paperwork properly, it's okay. Now, he may have gotten greedy and sloppy and maybe had bad judgment, but nobody's saying his vote was for sale. I think sometimes we miss the forest for the trees. You know, I'm very proud of people like Lawrence Lessig at Harvard, who's trying to call attention to the whole money in politics problem, not just this one outlier. He's not corrupt. He may have been dumb, but he's not corrupt.
Well,
he's not for sale.
Was a little corrupt, but
He's not for sale.
And he's an exhibitionist. That's what he is. But the truth is that this is something, as Tom was saying about the emails. Why would you do this? You're in public office. You're dependent on voters to want to vote for you, and everything you do is going to be public, and everything your family does is going to be public. So why on earth would you do this unless you just want to draw attention?
It's especially sad, though, because he was bipartisan. Unlike Ted Cruz and some of these other people, he was bipartisan. He was reaching out. He was trying to do good things. I think it's a terrible lapse of judgment. But he was not for sale. And we got people for sale we're not talking about.
Okay, before we go, I want to turn to Israel. Steve, you just got back from Israel. You just interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu. We heard the president last night in an interview with the Huffington Post say, essentially, he doesn't really trust that Benjamin Netanyahu wants a two-state solution. What are your thoughts?
All along, in different ways, has been trying to waffle, that's a pejorative term, I guess, but balance between his voters and another important constituency, the United States. The United States wants him to go for a two-state solution with the Palestinians. His voter base doesn't want him to do that. And Netanyahu, from 2009, when he said that theoretically he was in favor of a Palestinian state, has tried different versions of saying, I'm in favor of it, but only under these conditions, and it can't happen right now. He went a little farther right before the election, and now Obama won't let him take it back.
And let me ask you how you think it'll affect the politics going forward, the candidates for 2016? How do they deal with this?
I think the question... Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Steve.
Okay,
Let's hear quickly from you.
The question is, the White House has talked about supporting Israel in a different way, actually less, at the United Nations, where they've really needed, Israelis have really needed U.S. support. If that were to happen, if the U.S., for example, were to let some kind of a resolution about a Palestinian state go through the United Nations Security Council, then you have a live, ongoing news event in the middle of the presidential campaign, and we will hear a lot from Republicans.
If that happens, they will pay a tremendous price politically, the Obama administration and the Democratic Party. It's a huge mistake to make a threat like that.
Then it becomes a partisan issue, and Israel's never been a partisan issue, and for Israel to become the Republican cause and the Democrats to seem to be backing away would be very bad for Israel and for both parties.
But it would split the Democrats. It's not as if it would be partisan. It would actually be bipartisan opposition to a very narrowly based position by the president.
Because that's changing.
This is the worst time for us to be having this. Shame on Netanyahu to come over here, disrespect the President of the United States, go back home. He did fear-mongering against his own Arab citizens, which is horrible. And then to throw under the bus, not just Obama, but Reagan, both Clinton, to say you're not for a two-state solution, that goes against the basis of our partnership. So shame on Netanyahu for doing this to us. We should be talking about how to stop these extremists, not how to deal with the extremism from Netanyahu.
And he can't just say, never mind.
Yeah, no, you don't do that.
That's definitely not going over well. Thanks to all of you. Thanks, everyone.